Now let's look at making our thing list. Inside source, create a new file, capital T thing, capital L list.js. We know we're going to make a CSS file, so let's go ahead and make it, thinglist.css. I bet we're going to import React. Import capital R React from lowercase r React. I'm going to go ahead and make this one. Oops, sorry, I did that in the CSS. Wrong place. We'll make this a functional stateless component until we know otherwise. Const thing list. Now this one's going to have props. So in my parentheses, I'm going to go ahead and put props as an argument. We can have props in a functional stateless component, just not state. Let's go ahead and return something. I bet we're going to use a UL. Export default thing list. And let's import it in an app. Import thing list from thinglist.js. Go ahead and import our empty style sheet over here. Import thinglist.css. Save that file. I don't have any errors. Looks like I just have a warning that ThingList is defined but never used because I imported it and then haven't put it in here. So let's put it right under the header. ThingList. Make it empty. Nothing really shows up. It's just a UL right now. In the interest of getting something in there relatively soon, we could try hard coding a few things. Let's do it. I have an idea. So it's kind of a pain in the neck if a bunch of your components all have state. So we're going to put all the state up at the app level and pass that down as props to our other components. That makes it a lot easier if you ever need to, say, sync it with a database or something like that, if it's all kind of at the top level. So the only one component is actually responsible for maintaining state. I like to keep components stateless as much as we possibly can. So that's what we're going to do. So there's actually something we can do to avoid using a constructor, even if we have state to initialize. And that's using something called a property initializer, which is a feature that is not in ES6. It's not even in ES7, actually, although I see it called ES7 property initializers. It's actually just a draft at this point that is going to make it into a future version of ECMAScript, maybe in a year or two. It is somewhat subject to change because it is at that level of proposal, but it isn't likely to change very much. And Facebook is already using it in production, so we're going to use it too because it's kind of convenient. So what that lets us do for state is, instead of making a constructor and setting state in there, we can just say state equals just right inside the class itself. And that totally works. So we could just put an empty array of things here, or we could go ahead and make some up. Let's make some up. Let's hard code some for now. And this time, instead of making it an array, I'm actually going to make it an object of objects. The reason I'm going to do this become clear in just a second. So things is going to be an object inside that object. And then each individual thing is going to have a key of something like thing1. And then the value at that key is going to be my actual thing. So I'm going to give it an ID of thing1 and a name of whatever, milk. Let's make another one with an index of thing2, a value of an object with an ID of thing2, and a name of bread. Put one more, thing3, ID, thing3, name, bib lettuce, also known as Boston lettuce, the king of lettuces. If you haven't had bib lettuce or Boston lettuce, you're missing out. It's like candy. Like romaine and iceberg, they just taste like nothing, right? They just taste like water. Bib lettuce, man, that stuff's delicious. I like to evangelize for bib lettuce. Ask your grocer. So why did I do this? Well, now to get any particular thing out of there, if you already have the ID, you can just say this.state.things square bracket and that ID. Right? You don't have to find it. You don't have to search through it looking for it. You can just access it with a property. So that's kind of handy. It's going to be very handy. It does mean that if we want them to be in a particular order, we have to go to a little extra trouble. We can't just rely on an array to do that. So what we can do now is pass that list of things down to ThingList as a prop. So we could say things equal curly brace this.state.things. And inside ThingList, that will now be part of this.props. Props are totally allowed in functional stateless components, just not state. Doesn't matter that it was state in another component. By the time it's passed into here, it's just props. And props are how we pass data from one component to another. Let's give our UL a class name, remember, of ThingList, the name of the component. And inside this UL, let's render out all those things that were there. And I think we said we would make a new component for each thing, right? Let's go ahead and do that. New file, thing.js, import React from React. Const thing equals, and once again, this thing will probably have props. Let's just make this return an li with maybe say this dot props dot thing dot name. So we'll need to remember to pass in a prop called thing. And if that's the only prop we're going to need out of these props, we can use another trick called destructuring. And what destructuring does is it takes something out of an object or an array and creates a variable with, in the case of an object, the name of the property from that object. So, for example, if instead of props up there, I just put curly brace thing, then what that's going to do is give me a local variable called thing, and its value will be the thing property from whatever prop was passed in. So props is going to be an object, and each prop is going to have some name, right? Some property name. And we can destructure that props object and save just the individual items in it to local variables. It's a little complicated to understand, but if you just kind of get used to the pattern, I think you'll get the hang of it sooner or later. I'm going to go ahead and use it here so that I just have thing, so I don't have to say this.props.thing. I can just say thing. So I can put thing.name inside this li. May as well give the li a class name of thing. We tend to do that. Give the one element that is returned from a component a class with the name of the component. Export default thing. Inside ThingList, don't forget to import that. Import thing from ./thing. Notice that autocomplete, that is an extension. It is listed on the tools page on the website if you don't have it already. Okay, so we want to render one of those for everything that's in the things prop. Remember, over in app.js, when we use the ThingList component, we pass in a prop called things that contains whatever was in this.state.things. And for right now, we've hard-coded that to include these three things. So over here, that shows up as props. Now, and actually, it's not called this.props because this is a functional stateless component. It's just called props because it's just the name of the argument. So let's say for each of those things, we want to render a thing component. So we want to use map, right? Now, it's not an array yet. It's an object. So we're going to have to use a trick that I can't remember whether we've used this trick or not. We did use object.keys for something, right? So you can turn all of the keys, all of the property names from an object into an array that we can then map over. So let's do that. To use some JavaScript inside our JSX, we're going to use curly braces. We'll say object.keys. What's the object? It is props.things. And that'll be what was passed in this tag over in app.js. So it'll be what was this.state.things in app. And then let's call map on that. This is getting just a tad long, so I'm going to go ahead and make this a multi-liner. And we'll make an arrow function here. And we know that when you call map, the function that you give it, the callback function, is going to receive as its first argument each individual item in that array, right? And the array contains the keys. So key will be the argument to our arrow function. Remember, if there's only one argument, you don't actually need to put the parentheses around it. And if it's only a one-line function, you also don't need curly braces. And if that's the return value, you don't need to explicitly return if it's a one-line arrow function, which works out really well when we're using JSX, because all this function inside the map needs to do is return some JSX. What JSX? Well, we're going to make a thing, right? Now we know that the thing needs a prop called thing, right? If we look at thing here, we're relying on a prop called thing. So let's make sure that's there. Thing equals what? So the key is just going to be like, if we look at that object, the key is going to be the string thing1. So that would do something. Let's try it. Just sticking key in here. Well, something showed up. Got a little problem. Each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. Check the render method of ThingList. So what that means is React needs a way to tell one thing from another. Anytime you're looping over something and putting a whole bunch of the same component, it needs a way to tell them apart. It needs a unique identifier. And the key works perfectly well as, well, the key. So notice it says it needs a unique key prop, which means we actually need a prop called key on thing, and it needs to be equal to that key. Yeah. If that's too many keys, you could call it a thing ID here. That way it's a little clearer. That the name of the prop is a magic word, but the name of our local variable is not. It just has to be something that uniquely identifies that thing. Okay, no more error, but I also don't see anything here. Let's inspect one of these. Yeah, it looks like there's nothing inside that LI. Now, during the setup instructions, did you all install the React DevTools in Chrome? If you did not, you definitely want to do that. It's super handy. So let's flip over to our React tab here. And if that's way off to the right, you can just drag and drop to reorder those tabs. I'm going to put it right next to Elements and Console because it's going to be the thing that we use the most outside of those. So inside the React DevTools, to make this a little wider, show up a little differently, you'll see what looks a lot like the Elements tab, except instead of seeing the raw HTML, the actual DOM, you're seeing the names of the components. And then over here, it shows you the props. It shows you the state if there is one. Let's click on app. We see props, empty. State has these things. Also notice $R in the console up here, just like the $0. So $R now in the console will actually give us that component. So I can say $R dot state and see it. Really, really handy for troubleshooting. And as these things get nested and it's a little hard to track down what you're looking for, you can also use this little search box here. I can start typing thing, and it'll show me only the components that actually match that. So we see they all have a key, they all have a thing. So if you look at props on this thing, we have a prop called thing, which is thing3. Props are always read-only. State you can modify within that component. Props you cannot. So inside a component, like inside ThingList, we cannot change props.things. That is passed down from another component, and we can't change it locally. We can use it, but we can't make changes to it. If you need to make changes to data, you either need to use state, or you need to do it the way that we're going to do it, which is just calling a function from a different component that does have state. So that'll become clear as we actually do it. But it looks like our props are what we thought they were. But if we swing over to thing.js, you may remember I didn't put thing inside braces here, did I? I put thing.name. Because when I wrote this, I wasn't expecting it to be just the key. I was expecting it to be the actual object. So if I want to make sure that this thing prop is set to the actual object, how do I need to change line 11 here? Instead of thing equals thing ID, what can I put inside those braces? How do I get the thing that's actually at that index? Say it with confidence, Mohawk. Oh, come on. I like it. Props.things, brackets, thing ID. Get it? So that's getting the item out of the object that's at that index. It's not an array, it's an object, right? But we know we can use the square brackets to get something at that position, just like we can use the dot. But we need to use square brackets here because we don't have the actual value thing1, thing2, thing3. We have that stored to a variable, thing ID. So if we do that and save, milk, bread, bib lettuce. Hot. All right? It's not very pretty, but it works. So we have basically working components. Yeah, we have hard-coded these things, but this is a fairly major step. So I'm going to go ahead and commit basic thing list and thing components.